Hi guys, on this video, I'm going to be talking about how I got started creating GIFtubers for streaming, as well as how I make them on the iPad. As a quick story on how it all started, in 2022, I was mostly making PNGTUBers either for commission or for myself to use on stream. And then I made it my goal that on December 2022, I was gonna buy a PC so that I'll be able to learn how to do live 2D and make my own VTuber model. To make a long story short, I didn't succeed in being able to buy a PC, but I didn't want to stay sad about it, so I took it as a challenge and readjusted my goals. And those goals are 1. Learn a new skill. 2. Find an alternative that is a bit similar to VTuber models. And this was with the goal that I will only be using the iPad to make these models. Because I was only gonna use my iPad, I had to find an animation app that had the feature I need the most, which is transformation keyframes. Unfortunately, I found Callipeg, which has those exact features and more. Now that I found my animation app, it's time for me to check first if the PNGTubing programs used actually accept GIF files. I was so happy to find out at the time that they do. The programs that I specifically want to use is VideoTube, the one on the right, and the one on the left, Discord Reactive Fugitech. As you can see, in Discord Reactive, you need to have a Discord account because this needs to be linked to a VC, a voice channel. You've probably seen this in collaborative streams wherein a streamer has friends that they're with and their images light up while they're talking, since this is actually audible based, meaning when they're talking, they switch between a talking image, and when they're not, they switch to an idle image. So basically, the only difference between PNGTubers and GIFtubers is the file format. So in PNGTuber, it's PNGs, and GIFtubers, it's GIFs. For Discord Reactive, you only need 2 images, one that's speaking and one that's idle. As for VideoTube, you can actually put 4 images to create a simple blinking animation while it's either on idle mode or speaking mode. Now, the fun thing about reactive GIFs or GIFtubers is that you'll only need 2 images, which fits exactly with what Discord needs, so that you can put additional animation as well in the loop, including mouth movement, blinking, hair movement, and so much more. I hope that I was able to explain the differences between PNGTubers and GIFtubers and basically how I use them on their specific programs, because now we're gonna get to how I make them. Okay, so we have Callipeg and Procreate open here, and one rule that you should stick to as much as possible is having the same canvas size as the illustration and the animation. The reason for this is that it'll be easier to do revisions or update and replace the PNGs just in case you have to without breaking the proportion. So these are the layers that I prepared for this GIFtuber from Procreate. I've already flattened them and I'm ready to export as PNGs. Something to note, the more parts you separate, the more detailed your animation can get. Now it's time to import the PNGs in the photo app to Callipeg. I believe there are other ways for you to import PNGs or any images to Callipeg simultaneously, but this is just my preferred method as it's what I've always been doing ever since I started using the app. Now that I've imported the images, the first thing that I do is extend the drawing layers to the actual number of frames that I plan to make this into, which is 40 frames. Now you just double tap on the timeline to make sure that that's exactly where the loop ends, as you can see here. Now I'm labeling each layer so that's easier for me to navigate them. As you can see here, this is how you select multiple layers so that you can group them or even put them in the same transformation layer. And you'll see here, when you select the transformation layer, you'll see a bounding box that shows what elements are under it. And when you move it, it'll automatically create a keyframe. Remember to also label the transformation layers as you keep making them so that it's easier to go back and track them. Now, I'm just creating a transformation layer for each part As you can see here, I'm pointing out the bounding box that's being selected as I keep making more transformation layers. As you can see, I'm selecting the layers that are part of the face and I'm putting it under the same transformation layer as the head. Then creating another transformation layer that would include the head and the ponytail. What I'm basically doing here is linking each part that should be moving simultaneously, but also being able to move separately by having their own keyframe layer. Now I'm moving the anchor points on each part, and as you can see here in the head, I put it right by the neck, and the ponytail, and the body. Now it's time to keyframe, and we're starting with the head. So I'm checking the anchor point and the movement is good, it's in the right place. Now as you can see, I'm creating a keyframe at the first and last frame. This is so that I will be creating a loop animation. For the first movement, I like starting off in the middle and then just adjusting it depending on the timing that I want to create. Now you will see the very feature in Callipeg that I love using and I consider a very powerful tool that Procreate Dreams doesn't have. And that is the curve tool. The curve tool is so powerful because not only can you create or customize the timing according to how you want it far more easily, because you don't have to create so many keyframes to be able to time them. You can just literally use, as you can see here, I'm just using 3 keyframes and the rest is just curves. I absolutely love using Procreate Dreams, but timing there is really tricky. It takes so much more time, and with Callipeg, it's just to be able to put few keyframes and create this much movement and timing. It's, I don't know, I mean, I just can't say enough good things about it. It's such an amazing feature. Okay, enough with the praising and let's get back to my process. So right now, I'm keyframing the body. I'm actually just going to be adjusting the scale here so that it gives a breathing-like movement. Another thing here in Callipeg is that you can actually adjust the drawing layer, meaning you don't really have to go back to your drawing app to make small changes. So for this one, I wanted to adjust the size of the body, like widen it up a little just so that's a bit more balanced with the size of the head. So as you can see here, I will be going to the drawing layer and then clicking the transform tool, and then as you can see, I'm able to adjust it and then it just automatically applies. Alright, so that's a check for the head movement, ponytail movement, and the body movement. So I usually go from the bigger elements and narrowing down into the more smaller and more detailed animation. We also have some handy color labels here, so I'm just marking these as sort of done, like when it comes to the keyframing. And now we're gonna go in and transform the other smaller elements, specifically the eyes and mouth. I separated the brows from the eyes and mouth, and now I'm here just labeling and creating transformation layer for the mouth because I created 3 frames for the mouth movement. Now this is also fun to do in Callipeg, which is just fixing or arranging the frames as well as the timing. Even duplicating is really easy. Like, look at that. It's really easy to do. You can do it as many times as you want. There's even a duplicate of a blank canvas in case you want to draw another frame. So one of the factors here as compared to Dreams, I feel that it's easier to do frame by frame here just because of the ease of moving the frames around. Now that I'm happy with the sequence of mouth movements, I can start keyframing them just to add a bit of smooth transition. In order to minimize the amount of layers for it, I decided to just put all frames in one layer. This extra layer that I'm making is for idle mode. It basically has just the smiling mouth with no movement. Now I'm creating a transformation layer for it and then putting the anchor point usually right above. When placing the anchor points, my tip is to, just test it out first, just like what I do here. When I keyframe the mouth movement, I usually utilize the scale, specifically the scale Y, but you can also mix it up with the scale X just so that you create more dynamic movements with it. But for this one, I'm only using scale Y, so please ignore the scale X that keeps appearing. It's sort of a default that even though there's no change in the keyframe on scale X, it still generates a frame. So just ignore that, please. It's honestly a bit hard to explain how I'm moving these keyframes since this is basically in time with the frame images that I showed you guys before. So it's typically better if you time it, since what I'm basically doing here is just for the open mouth, I'm just creating an open and close movement for it. So as you can see, it's like it sort of opens and then it closes small until we go to the smile frame. So as you can see here, I'm adjusting it, right? There you can see I'm adjusting it because it needs to coincide with one another. Now, one of the things that I love about Callipeg is that you can actually go to this format and move the keyframes while you are checking the frames as well to be able to time it better. You can pause on this part just so that you can see how I align the frames to the keyframes. Now I'm just checking the idle mode version wherein there's no animation and it's just the drawing layer of the mouth smiling. We're moving to the brows and eyes, and I'm creating transformation layers for both of them, but I usually start this off with the eyes first because usually for the brows it's easier to time it once the animation for the eye movement like closing is already final. Just like the mouth, I decided to combine the open and close eyes in one layer before I create a keyframe animation of them, and then create a separate layer again for idle mode wherein the eyes are just open, there's no animation that's gonna be done. For the anchor point, I usually like putting it close to the bottom just so that, I guess for the lids, it creates a more natural movement of the lid closing as we transition to the frame with the eyes closed. The keys here are close to one another since I need to switch between them quickly. So you'll see here and observe. It's a pretty simple movement, more of just making the eyes small until we get to the closed eyes frame. As for the timing on how close you want the blinking to happen, that's up to you now. Just explore and have fun! This is how you copy-paste keyframes in Callipeg. You can do one or multiple of them at the same time. So Procreate Dreams is still working on this for their next update, which is good news. Now we're moving to brows, which is probably the fastest one since we already have everything timed, and we're just gonna put it in line to the eyes closing. So what I'm keyframing here is just the position Y, since it's just going up and down. I also love this feature wherein you can turn off the animation just so that I guess you can, compare it for some kind of keyframing if you want to do two types of keyframes, so you can test the first one and the second one without having to delete it. So that's a really handy feature. I'm not done yet. There's one more hack that I want to share with you guys, which is updating the drawing layers. So one of the great things about this is that for whenever you need to revise an element or an illustration, or you change your mind, just like this one, as you can see, I already have eyes drawn. I can just put it under the transformation layer and align it with the specific element that I want to replace, which on this one, it's the eyes. So I have a more detailed drawing of the eyes and the eyes closed, and look at this, I'm just putting it on the same transformation layer, which means I don't have to erase anything, I just have to hide it. There's so many features that I shared here that I hope explains why I can't really compare Procreate Dreams with Callipeg at the moment, because they both have amazing features that the other doesn't have. And there's nothing wrong with loving both of them, especially since it just inspires me to create more art, which you'll eventually see me share because I'm not done yet. One final thing, Callipeg actually released Callipeg Mini, which is available on the iPhone, and it's just as powerful as its iPad counterpart. Like, look at this. I'm literally opening my Callipeg files from the iPad to my iPhone, which means that the tutorials I shared also applies on this app. The only difference is the interface. And we're done! Thank you so much for reaching this far. I hope that this video has helped you learn Callipeg. This is probably the most detailed process I've ever posted regarding my Callipeg process, and I look forward to making more in the future. I'd love to hear from you in the comments if this has helped you and if you have any further questions. And as I say, let's go out there and make art.